When you imagine starting over, not just the idea of it, but the actual moment of it, the first conversation where you have to explain it to someone, where does that land in your body? Because for most people, it does not land in the chest or the throat where disappointment usually sits. It lands lower, somewhere in the stomach, a specific kind of weight that is not just sadness and is not just fear. It is shame. And I want to talk about that today. The specific, particular shame of starting over, because I think it is one of the most misunderstood experiences a person can carry and one of the most consequential. If we do not name it accurately, we cannot address it accurately. If we cannot address it accurately, it keeps running underneath every next attempt, quietly shaping what we are willing to risk and what we are not. Here is what the shame of starting over actually is. It's not the shame of having done something wrong. You can sit with that kind of shame and eventually address it, confess it, make amends, do what needs to be done. That kind of shame has a process. The shame of starting over is something different. It is the shame of being visible in a position you did not choose, of being seen by people who watched you build the thing that did not work, now watching you begin again. It is the exposure of the gap between where you thought you would be by now and where you actually are. And it carries with it a very specific internal narration. They know. They can see the distance between what I promised and what delivered. That narration is extremely loud. Here is what makes it so damaging. Most of the people it speaks about, the ones you imagine watching, calculating, drawing conclusions, are not actually doing what the narration says they are doing. They are occupied with their own lives, their own gaps, their own distance between where they thought they would be and where they are. The audience the shame constructs is largely fictional, but it does not feel fictional. It feels like a room full of people who are watching you very carefully. Performing okayness in that imagined room costs you something real. It costs you the energy that should be going into the actual new beginning. Here is what this cost looks like in practice. I want to be specific because this is where the damage shows up in ways people do not always connect back to the shame. When you are carrying the shame of starting over, you systematically underfund the new attempt. Not only financially, though sometimes that too, but in terms of commitment, you hold something back. You do not fully invest the way you invested the first time, because full investment means full exposure, and full exposure means the gap is fully visible if this one does not work either. So you hedge, you qualify, you build in an exit earlier than the situation actually warrants. You tell people about it in softer language than it deserves. You make the new beginning slightly smaller than your actual vision requires, not out of wisdom, but out of protection. None of this is conscious. It all happens underneath the level of deliberate decision-making. The shame is doing it. You are just making the smaller decisions and calling them prudent. Okay, stay with that for a second, because this is the part that nobody names clearly enough. The shame of starting over does not just make you feel bad. It directly degrades the quality of the new attempt by making you invest in it cautiously. And caution applied to something that requires full commitment is not wisdom. It is the insurance policy of someone who is protecting against another loss instead of building toward the next thing. The result is a second attempt quietly undermined before it begins. That is why this matters so much. A wounded decision still looks like a decision. A guarded commitment still sounds responsible. But over time, those smaller choices become a smaller life than the one God was inviting you to rebuild. There is a pattern I want to name early because I think it is the most dangerous version of this season. It is the version where starting over does not feel like starting over. The shame is present, but it does not announce itself as shame. It disguises itself as something that sounds like wisdom. Here is what that sounds like in practice. I am being more realistic this time. I learned what I needed to learn. I am not going to overextend. I am not going to make the same mistakes. Now, those sentences can be wisdom. Genuinely, appropriate learning from experience is valuable. The judgment refined by real failure is one of the most important assets the locust years produce. But there is a version of those sentences that is not wisdom at all. It is shame wearing wisdom's vocabulary, and the way to tell the difference is to ask what those sentences are producing in your actual decisions. Is being more realistic producing accurate risk assessment? Or is it producing a consistent downward adjustment of what you are willing to attempt, regardless of the actual risk level of the specific opportunity in front of you? Is not making the same mistakes producing targeted adjustments to what specifically went wrong? Or is it producing a general posture of caution that applies equally to situations that are genuinely risky and situations that are not? If the pattern of your decisions is consistently smaller than the situations actually call for, if you find yourself pulling back before you have fully assessed whether pulling back is actually warranted, that is not realism. That is shame in a better suit. That sentence matters because many people do not lose their next season through rebellion. They lose it through a fear that learned to speak in respectable language. It sounds responsible. It sounds mature. It sounds like you are protecting what remains. But underneath it, the soul is often saying something simpler. I cannot survive being seen like that again. And I want to offer a completely different accounting. A few years back, I watched someone I know closely go through this. She had built a business, real work, real capital, real faith invested. It did not survive the first 3 years. And the hardest part, she told me later, was not the financial loss. It was the first dinner party she attended after it closed. When someone asked what she was doing now, she had to say the honest version. She told me she rehearsed that sentence for 3 days before the dinner. 3 days for one sentence. She told me the room was kind. That was almost the hardest part. No one mocked her. No one raised an eyebrow. People kept eating, smiling, passing plates, asking ordinary questions. But inside, she felt as if every casual sound in that room had become a witness. The scrape of a chair, a glass being set down, someone saying, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." Small things, normal things. But shame turns ordinary rooms into courtrooms. What she could not see at that dinner party, what she told me she only saw much later, was that everything she was carrying that she thought was liability was actually asset, the judgment she had developed from watching that business fail, the relationships she had built that survived the failure and would now work with her again. The specific, expensive knowledge of what does not work in that industry at that stage of development. The self-knowledge of having pushed past a comfort zone that most people never reach. None of that showed up in the shame accounting. Shame counted the losses. It was not counting what had been built in the building of the loss. And this is what I mean when I talk about a different accounting. There is a verse from the prophet Joel that I want you to hear not as a spiritual sentiment, but as a legal claim. God said, "I will restore to you the years that the locust has eaten." The Hebrew word used there is shalom. It is a legal term. In the ancient Near Eastern legal context, shalom meant restitution, the formal obligation of one party to compensate another for what had been taken or damaged. It is not a word for comfort. It is a word for a court judgment. God is not saying, "I will help you feel better about the years that were consumed." He is making a legal declaration. The locust years are in the record. What was eaten has a claim on it, and the claim is restitution. Now, that does not mean restoration always arrives as a copy of what disappeared. Sometimes the thing is not rebuilt in the old shape because the old shape could not carry what God is forming next. Sometimes the repayment is wisdom. Sometimes it is discernment. Sometimes it is a relationship that would not have existed without the closed door. Sometimes it is a steadier spirit, a cleaner yes, a stronger no, a capacity to build without needing applause as oxygen. That is still restoration. Not because it is smaller than what you lost, but because it is deeper than what you first knew how to ask for. And this is why you have to be careful with the word wasted. Wasted means nothing came out of it. Wasted means heaven recorded no value. Wasted means the pain produced no wisdom, no discernment, no holy resistance, no future strength. That is not the accounting Joel is giving you. Think about what that means for the starting over you are in. The years that felt like loss, the effort, the faith, the resources, the time, the hope you invested in the thing that did not work. Those years are not simply gone from God's accounting. They are in it. And shalom means they will be returned. Not in exactly the same form, because restoration does not work that way, but in value, in the compounded interest of what was built in the building of what failed. You are not starting from nothing. You are starting with everything those years built into you. The judgment refined by specific failure, the resilience developed by staying in something past the point where it stopped being comfortable, the character formed under the specific pressure of a thing not working the way you needed it to. Those are not visible in the conventional accounting. Shame cannot see them, but they are real. And the person who begins again with them is not the same person who began the first time. Starting over is not going back to the beginning. It is going forward with assets the first beginning could never have produced. You know which rooms drain you now. You know which promises need evidence before you build around them. You know what kind of pressure makes you rush, what kind of approval makes you exaggerate, what kind of fear makes you shrink. That knowledge is not decorative. It changes the architecture of the next decision. The locust years refined your judgment. They did not disqualify your capacity. The shalom accounting includes the restoration of what was lost, and that includes the confidence to attempt what this new beginning actually requires of you, not only the hedged version of it. Begin again fully, with everything the hard years built, without the protection of a smaller commitment than the vision deserves. That is the whole invitation of starting over, not a smaller version of the original attempt. A new beginning with more than the first beginning had. And God's accounting already confirms it. There is one more layer inside this mindset shift, because it is the one that trips people up in the actual execution of beginning again. The question of pace. Here is what tends to happen. Someone has gone through a significant loss, a business, an investment, a plan that consumed real years and real resources. They do the work of accepting it. They start to believe the shalom accounting. They get the morning sentence established. And then, this is the part that trips them up, they expect the new beginning to move at the pace they wished the previous one had moved. They want to close the distance quickly. That urgency is completely understandable, but urgency applied to a new beginning that is still finding its shape tends to force the shape before it is ready. You push the new thing into a form that can move quickly instead of a form that can move durably. Durable is what the shalom accounting is building toward. Restoration is not reconstruction. Reconstruction would be putting back exactly what was consumed in exactly the form it was consumed as fast as possible. That is not shalom. Shalom is making whole, returning the value of what was taken in a form appropriate to where you are now, not where you were then. Which means the new beginning is not the old thing rebuilt faster. It is something new, shaped by everything the old thing built into you, moving at the pace that serves what you are actually building rather than the pace that closes the gap with where you think you should be. That pace requires patience. And patience in a starting over season is not passive. It is the active discipline of building what needs to be built without forcing the timeline. Here is a practical question for that specific challenge. Ask it when the urgency to move faster than the situation warrants starts to press on you. Am I moving at the pace this beginning requires, or at the pace that closes the gap? Those two paces are different. Which one you are moving at determines in large part what you end up building. The pace that closes the gap is usually anxious. It keeps checking whether other people can see progress yet. The pace this beginning requires is quieter. It asks what would make the work durable if no one praised it for a while. One pace is trying to repair an image. The other is trying to build a life. The locust years were consumed over seasons. Joel is writing to people who experienced multiple consecutive years of loss, and the restoration God describes is not a single dramatic reversal. It is a return, compounded, forward, appropriate to the new season. Your new beginning is a return of that kind. Build it at the pace it requires. Trust that the Shalom accounting is already working, even in the seasons when the pace feels slower than you wish it were. I want to say something about the people watching, because the imagined audience is only one problem. The actual people in your life are a different one. There are people in your life right now who genuinely love you and who are also uncertain about this new beginning. They watched the last one. They may have invested in it emotionally, financially, or in terms of their own credibility when they told other people about what you were building. And now you are asking them to watch another one. That is not nothing. Their uncertainty is real. And I think it deserves honesty rather than management. Here is what I have seen work in this specific situation. Not the performance of confidence you do not yet have, not the overpromise that attempts to preempt their doubt. The honest version. Something like, I know what you watched. I know what the last one cost. I'm not asking you to feel certain about this one. I'm asking you to see that I am not the same person who started the last one. That honesty does something performance cannot do. It lets the real relationship operate. It lets the people who are genuinely for you engage with you, rather than with the version of you that you are presenting. There is something in Psalm 37, not a verse I'm going to quote directly, but a principle embedded in it, that the person who walks with God stumbles but does not fall completely, because they are held by a hand they cannot see, but that is genuinely there. The stumble is real, the hold is also real, and the people in your life who can see both, who can honor the stumble and recognize the hold, are the people to keep close in the new beginning. Not everyone in your life needs to be part of the new beginning at the same level of involvement. Some of the people who were deeply involved in the previous attempt may need a different role in this one. Not because they are not trustworthy or not valued, but because the dynamics of what happened before may make a different relational configuration serve better. Begin again with the people who can receive the honest version of what you are doing. Not everyone, the right ones. And let the others observe from an appropriate distance while you build. This matters because starting over does not require you to reopen your life to every opinion. Humility is not unlimited access. Wisdom knows the difference between being honest and being exposed to voices that only know how to measure you by the last visible result. There are also people in your life who invested in the previous attempt. Not just emotionally. Some of you have people who put money in, who vouched for you in professional rooms, who told their own networks that you were building something worth watching. Now they are being asked to witness another beginning. The shame around that specific situation, owing someone a result you did not deliver, is different from the general shame of starting over. It is targeted, specific, and it tends to produce one of two responses. The first is avoidance. You distance yourself from those people during the new beginning because being around them reminds you of the gap between what you promised and what delivered. You stop returning calls. You become vaguer about what you are building now. You manage the relationship from a distance until you have something better to show. This is the most common response. And it costs you two things. It costs you the relationship because the distance is felt even when it is not named. And it costs you access to the very people who in many cases are best positioned to help with what comes next. The second response is overcompensation. You pitch the new thing to them before it is ready, because you need them to feel good about you again before the gap can be closed. You overpromise on the new beginning because the underpromise is too heavy to carry. Neither of these serves you, neither serves the relationship. Here is what actually works. And I know it is harder than both of the easy options. Go back to those people, not with a pitch, with honesty. Something close to this. I know what happened with the last one. I know what it cost you, in whatever terms it cost. I am not here to pitch you on the next thing. I wanted to close the gap honestly, tell you what I learned, and say where I am now. That conversation, the honest one, not the managed one, does something that distance and overcompensation cannot do. It lets the relationship survive and sometimes deepen, because the person who comes back honestly, without a pitch, without performing okayness they do not have, is showing exactly the kind of character that makes them worth staying close to. Some people will need time. Others may be done, and that is their right. But the ones who were genuinely for you, who invested because they believed in you as a person, not only in the specific attempt, can often meet honest failure better than they can meet the managed version. Do not let shame make you disappear from the people who matter. The shame wants to protect you from the exposure, but the protection it offers costs you the relationships that would otherwise be part of what gets restored. Shalom is not a solo project. Restoration involves the people who belong to the next season, and some of them are people from the previous one, if you give the relationship the honesty it deserves. Now, let me give you the practices. 2 of them, 1 for every morning, 1 for every week. The morning practice takes 60 seconds before your phone, before you check anything, before the day has had a chance to establish the shame accounting as the context for your morning. Write this sentence once. Today I begin again, and nothing the locusts ate is wasted. Then say it out loud. That is the entire practice. 15 words, spoken once every morning. Let me explain why those specific words do what they do. Today. Not last year, not the accumulated history of the thing that failed. This specific day. I begin again. Not I continue recovering. Not I am still processing. I begin. Active, present tense, agency in the verb. Nothing the locust ate is wasted. This is the shalom claim applied to your specific situation. The years that were consumed are in God's accounting. Nothing was simply deleted. Everything was recorded. And restoration, forward, not backward, in a form appropriate to what comes next, is already in motion. The sentence does not change the external situation on day 1. What it does on day 1 is place you correctly in relation to your own starting over before the day has had a chance to place you otherwise. Say it before your inbox tells you who needs something, before old numbers tell you what is missing, before the body remembers the embarrassment and calls it a prophecy. The first voice of the day matters because it becomes the frame through which the rest of the day is interpreted. On day 15, the words are starting to feel slightly more true than they did on day 1. Not completely, but slightly. On day 30, something quieter happens. Shame's accounting is still there, but it is competing with the shalom accounting now, and the practice truth has been heard more recently. Month 3, you notice that you are making decisions that are slightly less hedged than they were when you started, slightly more committed, slightly closer to what the new beginning actually requires. That is the practice doing what it was built to do, not immediately, over time. The weekly practice runs alongside it. Every Sunday, 10 minutes, 3 questions. First, what did this week reveal that the locust years built in me? Not what the years destroyed, what they produced. The specific, expensive knowledge you have now that you did not have before. The judgment refined by pressure, the discernment, the capacity for something that could only have been developed the hard way. Second, What one step did I take this week in the direction of the new beginning? Not how far did I get? Did I move, even slightly, toward what I am building? Third, where did I see evidence of restoration this week? Even something small, not the full restoration, evidence of it. A conversation that happened because of a relationship the previous attempt built. A decision made well because of something learned from what failed. An opportunity that came through a door the failure opened. These three questions are not a performance of optimism. They are a discipline of accurate observation, training your attention to notice what shame's accounting systematically misses. Attention trained consistently over weeks begins to see what it has been trained to see. The locust years are not simply gone. They are being worked forward into the new beginning, in a form appropriate to what the next season requires. Now let me bring this home with something specific you can do this week. Not in addition to the morning sentence, but alongside it. Identify one relationship you have been managing from a distance, one person who was part of the previous attempt in some meaningful way, and whom you have been avoiding, subtly, maybe not even consciously, because being around them activates the shame accounting. Do not pitch them. Do not prepare a presentation. Just reach out and ask if they have time for a conversation. Not about selling the new beginning, about closing the gap honestly from the last one. In that conversation, say the honest version of what happened, what it cost, what you learned, where you are now. Not performed, not managed, the actual version. Then, this is the important part, do not fill the silence that follows. Let them respond to the real version rather than to the version you have been presenting. You may be surprised by what comes back, because the people who were genuinely for you are not waiting to confirm that you failed. They are waiting to see whether you are someone who comes back honestly. And the person who does that, who returns with honesty instead of distance or overcompensation, demonstrates exactly the character that makes the new beginning worth investing in. Not everyone will be ready. Some people need time, some are done, and you have to let that be true. But the ones who are genuinely for you will meet the honest version better than they can meet the managed one. Go back, be honest. Be the person who did not disappear. That is the final piece of this practice. And notice how small the action is. One message, one request for a conversation, one honest sentence you stop rehearsing and finally speak. The new beginning does not always announce itself through a massive public move. Sometimes it begins when you refuse to let shame keep one relationship locked behind a closed door. You are not trying to convince them. You are not trying to recover your image in one conversation. You are simply becoming the kind of person who can stand in truth without disappearing. That kind of person can build again. And now, the prayer. Father, for the person who is carrying the shame of starting over right now, who is hedging the new beginning, managing the audience, pulling back from people who mattered, let the shalom accounting replace the shame accounting. Not by ignoring the loss. The loss was real. The consumed years were genuinely consumed, but by seeing what was built in the consuming, the judgment, the depth, the capacity to hold something more durable than what was lost. Let the morning sentence begin its work, daily, before shame has a chance to establish itself as the context. For the relationship that has been avoided, give them the courage for the honest conversation, not the pitch. The person. Give them the steadiness to stop shrinking their calling to fit the wound. Give them the discernment to move with patience, not panic. Let what was learned in the hard years become usable now. Let the wisdom purchased through pain become protection, not a prison. Where they have called themselves late, let them hear that you are still working. Where they have called themselves disqualified, let them remember that stumbling is not the same as being abandoned. Where they have measured the season only by what disappeared, teach them to recognize what you formed in secret. You are the God who restores. The accounting is already open. Amen. Next time, we are going to talk about something that stops more people in the middle of a hard season than almost anything else. Not fear of failure, not even fear of trying again. A specific confusion between two things that feel identical from the inside but require completely different responses from you.